Welcome back, guys, to the second video. I'm not really sure which one number this is. I'm not even numbering them, to be honest with you, but welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about ground techniques. Do they work? How do they work? And should you pick them over standing techniques in the street? Okay, so ground techniques. Do they work? Do they have a high chance of actually working in the street? Well, to be quite honest with you, yeah, they do. And the fact of the matter is, you're better off doing a ground move on techniques. God, that's, whew. You're better off doing ground moves than doing any type of standing move. And that's really, to piggy off my last video, that's really just to do with potential and possibility. And that's really that really just has to do with a lot with opportunity from your attacker. I mean, if you have an attacker and you guys are both standing on equal ground and they just take a step back and they're able to reset where they are, then you now have a very confident attacker in your hands that is realized your kung fu moves didn't work out because they were able to reset from your previous standing technique. So, and then they're back on their feet again and they're creating that distance. So now they've reset it and they've understood your technique. So now you have to come up with something new and be like, hey, how do I address this? Because now he's like, hey, I know your moves. So it's like, you got to figure out what is best in the situation. Now, when it comes to ground techniques are simply just better because it's you, it's your opponent, and it's the ground. And on top of that, you're going to have the gravity. Gravity plays a huge effect in self-defense, especially when you go to the ground, simply because it's a constant. You can always rely on gravity being there. You can always rely on the fact that if you remove someone's legs, they're going to fall down because that is what gravity does. You can rely on the fact that the ground is going to be there because we're not doing 360 Goku fighting, right? I mean, that's not a real thing yet. But either way, I mean, we're not doing these types of fights. So having that in consideration, the best thing that you're going to be able to do is use those constants and apply them in a beneficial factor towards yourself in this self-defense situation. Sure, there are some ground techniques that are a little bit iffy, and getting down to the ground can be a little bit iffy as well, but it's not about getting down to the ground, it's about when you're already in the ground, and should you learn those techniques that are on the ground. Yeah, 100%. You should always learn techniques, maybe not so much when it comes to standing, because it's just not, it's not as consistent as is the ground, because like I said earlier, in the ground you have your attacker, gravity, and the ground. So you have four things. When it's standing, it's just you, the attacker, open space, and gravity. And open space is really just a neutral. When it comes to you and your attacker. And it doesn't benefit you in any way. So if you have the ability to take the advantage in learning ground techniques, yeah, learn ground techniques. Now here's where ground techniques do tend to fail, and it's kind of an important one. Ground techniques tend to fail heavily when it comes to striking, because the distance is so close between your attacker and yourself and the ground, and gravity playing into a factor smushing you guys together. You can't really generate that much more force as you would standing. So that's one of those things where it's like, you could either, yeah, I understand it, but I'm still going to throw in my tiny little hook punches into those rib cages because that's what I can do, or maybe I'll get lucky and land in a clean elbow. You don't know, but when you're on the ground, you want to stick solely to techniques. Now when it comes to multiple attackers, that's also another place where the ground is kind of like not the best in, because I mean, if you're facing off multiple attackers, you don't have the thing that you do have when you're standing, which is mobility. And you do have the comfort of being able to protect yourself with the ground, or use that to your advantage more so. However, at times you're better off with mobility, because if you don't want to have the confrontation altogether, or if it's multiple people, your best bet is to just run. I mean, from a person who's like really macho, like, running is like not the best case scenario, but running when you only know ground techniques is your only scenario. I mean, if it's last resort and the only thing that you can do is your ground moves, then yeah, 100% use your ground moves. But if you have the slightest opportunity to create distance between you and your attacker, enough distance that you can either find help or just even literally anything, get a weapon of some sort to be able to defend yourself in that manner, then yeah, 100% that's going to be, mobility is always going to be better. But when it comes to the actual technique itself, ground techniques are superior. That's just how they are. Because again, I mean, it's not just that they're superior, it's that they have less opportunity for your attacker to be able to retaliate if you know the ground game. Renner Gracie said it in an interview with, I think it was Steven Crowder, about how most fights, not really most fights, but a lot of fights end up on the ground. And one of the things that he was saying was a beautiful analogy about swimming and jujitsu. And he compared it to, if you end up going into the deep end, then you're going to need to be able to swim. And well, jujitsu is that deep end, and learning how to swim is learning jujitsu or judo, whichever type of system you want to go with. Anything that is groundworthy is really something that you need to know. I'm not a fan of ground personally, but I do recognize its benefits, and I will not neglect it. I mean Ronda Rousey, to bring her up again for the second time in 2 videos in a row, she's was the world champion, and she knocked out one person by a fluke. I mean, come on. I mean, well, okay, it wasn't a fluke, but at the same time, it wasn't like she's Floyd Mayweather or something. I mean, she's not even like at the Conor McGregor level. I mean, that's right. Like all of her takedowns and victories have been by submission, and that's a credit to her and a credit to the ground fighting. So when it comes to things like that, opportunity is the thing that you want to avoid in your attacker. So ground techniques, learn them. Take them in. Learn as much as you can. There are some ground techniques that are a little bit iffy that I sometimes wouldn't necessarily agree with, but at the same time, it's like, what would you rather? Would you rather not know anything and be a dead fish, or would you rather learn something and be able to have the opportunity to get out while at the same time destroying the opportunity of your attacker? I mean, these are things to consider. But yeah, at the end of the day, the most important thing is your ability to perform your techniques, which is dramatically increased on the ground if you're a ground fighter, at the cost of mobility. And that is something that is, personally, I wouldn't sacrifice it. Not because I like striking people more. It's just because if you have if you're on your back and someone's coming at you, I mean, obviously the thing that you should do is get up and get away, or get up and fight. You shouldn't want to fight someone on the ground. I mean, it's nonsensical. There are techniques that work from standing to the ground. It's just I wouldn't be on the ground, especially if that's your prime area. Ground is great, but standing out offers mobility, and mobility offers freedom, and freedom offers security, and security is the thing that we're looking for when it comes to self-defense. So, I mean, that it is what it is. However, ground fighting does, or ground jujitsu, for example, jujitsu does have a tendency to be very beneficial when it's a one-on-one attacker. But the second weapons come in, it's like, it's very, very difficult to defend yourself against any type of weapon. I mean, if you have a bat, you still have that mobility. If you have a bat while you're on the ground, you don't have that mobility. So it's like, it's a coin flip, but at the same time, really just learn both. If you have the opportunity to learn both, learn both. There's no doubt about it. You need to be a good striker, and you need to be a good ground fighter in order to be better off in the martial arts world and in the self-defense world. On top of that, if you liked this video, hit a like. If you didn't like this video, hit the dislike. Tell me why, so I can make better videos for you guys. But until next time, this has been Solomon _.